Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah. We are on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Bet, 20 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. And today's Amud is being learned as Zchut Rufa Shel Ma for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, for Michael Ben Nahid, Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, that should all have full recovery. Rufa Shel Ma B'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Today's Amud is also being dedicated Leilu Nishmat Rachel Yafa Bat Netanel. Her neshama should have an aliyah. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shea family, Kohen family, Dayan families. Should be an ultimate zchut for all of their mishpachot. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. So we continue on our discussion, the tail end of the halachot of Hadas, before we start our Mishnah today on the kashrut and the halachot pertaining to Aravot. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan. So we learned En mema'atin b'yom tov, that if you have the hadas with all the berries that has majority is berries more than the ali, more than the leaves, it's pasul, we mentioned. And if mi'atan kasher, if you reduce the berries, you take them off, you snip them off, it's going to be kasher. And we said that you cannot do that on Yom Tov. Now we discussed this briefly before, that the Aruch, one of the Gedolei Rishonim, says that this is a Isur Deoraita. You can't necessarily do it, and it's a biblical level. Rashi in Amud Aleph, in Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, writes that this is Isur Derabanan, and there are others who learn this within, even the Khatam Sofer learns within even Rashi, that Rashi is speaking according to the Maskana of the Gemara here that we're just going to learn right now. But really, it is Deoraita, so it's a real serious topic. It's not something that you could just say, okay, it's affect the Rabbanan lekula. Perhaps you're talking about a Isura metaken mana or makeh bepatish, that it's asur to take the berries off on Yom Tov. En mematin be Yom Tov. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Azar it should be. Rabbi Shimon Amru. According to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, it will be mutar mema'atin. This whole offense of metaken mana or makeh bepatish doesn't exist. Even lechatchila, according to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, you could take them off on Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, wait a second. How do you deal with that? We just said Aruch says Deoraita, perhaps Rashi also. How do you deal with the Isura metaken mana? How come metaken mana? B'Yom Tov. You are fixing something a Yom Tov. So why is it mutar? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi, Kegon shlekatan le'achila. The scenario is if he took them to eat them. Lamed Gimel Amud Bet, some 20 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Shlekatan le'achila, that you took the berries not because you're trying to fix your hadas for arba minim, but rather because you want to eat them. You want to eat them. Your animal wants to eat them. Now this is actually parenthetically very interesting, because we mentioned in Midrashim that the arba minim are very interesting. They are representative of 4 segments of Klal Yisrael. Right? We have people who are good people. They're always helping others. Their chesed is extended to the community. But they don't have Torah. Intellectually, they don't have much to offer. You have people who intellectually have a lot to offer, but they're very much into themselves. They're introverts, and when it comes to social interactions, they're sitting, learning. That's what they're doing. Now, even that, really, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, the very fact of learning is one of the greatest chuyot for the nation. The Maharal writes in Netivot Olam, in Netiva Torah, towards the beginning, he writes that Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in a state of shalom, of peace and tranquility, no sickness, no death, no wars, nothing bad. And because of the sins, we kind of ruined it. We sent it down the tube. Now, if you learn Torah, the Torah is the shefa of the Bria, is the very spiritual energy of the original creation. So it pushes the world towards that state of creation, which is a state of perfection, peace, tranquility, completion, all of that. So therefore, you learn Torah, Marvim Shalom Ba'olam. Peace treaties are going to be worked out in the world just by the schut of people learning Torah and so on. So that's what Maharal writes. Ramchal writes something very similar in Derech Hashem, in Chelek Dalet Perek Bet. He writes that the greatest single shefa that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the Bria, he tied it as a skula, as a davar skuli, to one of the Taryag mitzvot, and you guessed right, that is the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. You do Talmud Torah, you're pulling on the greatest shefa that exists in the whole world. So that aspects we understand, but you have this thing of people who are not necessarily involved. So they have a lot of Torah, but not that much Masim Tovim. And then you have people who have both, and you have people who have none. And the Midrash simulates this too, the Arba Minim. Right? These are 4 segments of the community, like the ones who have good deeds, but they don't have much Torah, is Hadas. Right? Hadas has good smell. Right? It emanates the good smell to others, right? Outside, but doesn't have any taste. Right? Doesn't have any taste. The Arava has nothing, no taste and no smell. Right? The lulav, the palm tree, has beautiful dates. It's good taste, has good fruits, but no smell. And etrog is amazing, right? Etrog is those representing the tzaddikim that not only they have Torah, but they also give to others. It has good smell, it has good taste, is awesome, right? So you see from here that, nevertheless, that hadassim, they only have smell, they don't have fruits. But here we're talking about fruits of hadassim, that you took them off to eat them, right? So you have to say that this is not necessarily a normal eating, it's not normal fruit, or it's maybe for the animals. But be that as it may, says the Gemara, you know why Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon is allowed to say that you could do this on Yom Tov, you could actually make this kasher, because you don't care about the fruits, about the hadas rather. You only care about feeding yourself for animals, these berries that you have on hadassim. So what does that do? Why is it any better if I am picking fruits and I don't care about the hadas? You know why? Because Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, had a father who is known to us as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a.k.a. Rabbi Shimon. Now, one of the most famous shitot of Rabbi Shimon in Shas is that davar shenu mitkaven is not asur, right? If you have something, you do something that is not is unnecessary for its own thing that you do, then it's mutar. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon, Savar la kavua. He holds like his father. He holds like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Amar, davar she'en mitkaven mutar. That if you have something that you do unintentionally, it is mutar. That means that here I am not intending to fix this hadas. I'm intending to eat. So if I'm intending to eat and I'm taking these berries, and a fringe benefit of it, a side effect is that the hadas now became kasher, so be it. My kavanah is not for that. So hence it is davar shenu mitkaven, and Rabbi Shimon holds davar shenu is mutar, and his son happens to hold like him. Says the Gemara, V'ha Abaye v'Rava de Amri Torah. What's this? Gevaldik. I understand davar shenu mitkaven, but you know what else Rabbi Shimon agrees with? Even Rabbi Shimon, who holds davar shenu mitkaven is mutar, he still agrees that if it is psik reshe, then it's got to be asur, right? What's psik reshe? Psik reshe is cut its head. We've said this before. The example of the Gemara is you wanted to give a toy to your kid. Back in the day, the Fisher Price toy was a head of a chicken. So he says, I want to play with it. He says, no problem. You twist off the head of the chicken. You don't want it to die. You love the chicken. Right? So you guys say, I want to cut its head, but it should live. In other words, I don't care if it lives or dies. I'm not trying to shecht the animal and have its meat. For all practical purposes, I want it to live. I just need the head. So when I take off the head, it's just because I need the head, not because I need it to die. It happens to be that every time that we have seen that you take something's head off, it dies, right? So that byproduct called death is davar she'eino mitkaven, right? Poor man, he's not trying to kill it, right? He's just trying to take off the head, right? As funny as it sounds. But every single time, 10 out of 10, when you cut the head off, he dies. So that is a byproduct that is for sure going to come. That is psik reshe velo yamut. A byproduct that for sure will happen is psik reshe. Now, psik reshe, even Rabbi Shimon agrees that's asur. In other words, if I do something and the byproduct for sure is going to be happening, something asur, then he also is not happy with that. Says Abaye and Rava, Abaye and Rava, the Amrit Harvayu, they both say, Modeh Rabbi Shimon be'psik reshe velo yamut. Rabbi Shimon agrees that a scenario of psik reshe velo yamut, which means an isur is going to happen for sure as a byproduct, that also is asur according to even him. So Mara says, and here for sure is going to be that case, right? Because here you are taking these berries off. You don't care about the fixing of the hadas, but it for sure is going to fix the hadas. Mara says, not necessarily. We're talking about the case that you don't need this hadasim for your arba minim. You don't. You have your beautiful set of hadas meshulash, yur chazonish, right? That comes nowadays with a pillow and a blanket in a box with that you have already. So you're not trying, and you also don't need. It's both. You're not trying, so therefore it's davar she'eino mitkaven. According to Rabbi Shimon, is mutar. You tell me that's psik reshe that's going to fix that. I don't care about that. I don't need it. I'm not planning to use this, so it happens to become kasher. So what? I'm not in need of hadasim. I have my hadasim, and therefore, now if somebody else afterwards comes to my house and is looking for hadasim, and this happens to be there for them, and they ask, they say, oh, well, this had some berries on it. I made it kasher, so it was tikkun maneh, so maybe it should be. In that case, it's kasher because when I was taking them off, A, I did not have any kavana to make it kasher, and B, even you say byproduct is psik reshe, it's not psik reshe because I didn't need them. Psik reshe is only when I accomplish something as a side benefit. I didn't accomplish anything because I didn't need it. So says the Gemara, Tarabanan, Hutar igudo beyom tov, ogdo ka'aguda shel yarak. What do you do if the bundle of your lulav opens up on Yom Tov? Right? Opens up, it gets ripped, it opens, it shrivels and falls down if you make it from the thing. Can you have a way, halachic remedy to tie something on Yom Tov without getting into the isur of kshira? Of course, kosher umatir is one of the lametet melachot in both on Shabbat and on Yom Tov. So you can't tie something on Yom Tov, and this happens, pretty often. Things come off on Yom Tov, and you need to tie them back on, or you were too busy, you bought it, but you stuck it in the fridge, you forgot to do it, and comes Yom Tov morning, and you remember that, you did not tie your lulav and hadasim and aravot. So how do you do that? Hutar igudo b'Yom Tov. If the tie opened on Yom Tov, ogdo ka'aguda shel yerek. You know what you do is you could tie it like people tie the bundles of vegetables. How do you tie a bundle of vegetable? You don't make a knot on it. You take the strap, wrap it around, and when it comes to the end, you pull it tightly and you tuck it in the rest of the wrap, right? Like people do kind of like lavdil with their tefillin, right? You put it and you tuck it in afterwards. That's how you will do the eged if you have to do it on Yom Tov. So it says the Gemara, V'amai, why do you have to do that? Li'anveh. Why can't you just make an aniva? Why can't you make a bow? Because making a bow, according to halachot of Shabbat and Yom Tov, is not a isur kosher. It's just an aniva. It's just a thing that I could open with my hand or I pull the end of it and the whole thing unravels, that's not a kesher on Shabbat. So why don't we just, once you add it, in kvar, just do an aniva. Why do you have to wrap it and tuck it in? Just make an aniva. Gemara says, Hamani Rabbi Yehuda. This Braita is Rabbi Yehuda. We all remember, what's the shita of Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda holds that the lulav needs a kesher. Remember, we had a machloket if lulav needs to be bundled or doesn't needs eged or doesn't need eged. You remember that? So Rabbi Yehuda was the one that said lulav tzrich eged. We learned it gezerah shava from lekicha, right? Ulkachtem agudat ezov, ulkachtem lachem b'yom harishon. It's a comparison between the arba minim and the bundle of ezov. And bundle of ezov, we know that it had to be bundled and tied together. So Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that lulav sarich eged, he cannot deal with aniva because, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda idamar aniva kshira ma'al yatai. Rabbi Yehuda happens to hold in Chot Shabbat that tying with a bow knot is asur on Yom Tov and Shabbat. He equates a aniva with a kshira. So it's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you cannot do aniva. So you're basically stuck. You have to do this whole wrapping and tucking in business. The Gemara says, wait a second. If this is Rabbi Yehuda, if our Braita is Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore you can't do aniva because he holds aniva is, we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda. Right? We pass aniva is kasher. But if you say already that this is Rabbi Yehuda, eged ma'aliyata bai. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you need mamash an eged, mamash a knot. It has to be tied and knotted properly. This whole tucking in business is not going to work according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's for sure. Because that's not a kesher. So Gemara says, no, this is not Rabbi Yehuda. This is a Tana that holds like Rabbi Yehuda in one halacha. He holds in Hilchot Shabbat like Rabbi Yehuda, which means you cannot make aniva on Yom Tov and on Shabbat. The halacha of making aniva is equivalent of making a full-fledged kesher, so therefore you can't do it on Yom Tov. But when it comes to the lulav sarich eged, he doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Says lulav doesn't really need eged. So with a wrap and a tuck in is also sufficient, but he can't make aniva because he holds that on Yom Tov would be an isur of kosher umatir. It would be a problem, so therefore you can't do it. So haytanat savar le kevate bechada upalig ale bechada. Holds like Rabbi Yehuda in one halacha in Hilchot Shabbat, and argues with him in the other halacha Hilchot Lulav. Fine. Now we start our Mishnah about Aravot. So far we discussed the Lulav, right? Lulav HaGazul. Now we had Hadas HaGazul, and you remember the Meiri that says the majority of the psulim of all the Arba Minim is identical. You'll see the first two lines of the Mishnah is mamash identical to the previous Mishnah and the one before that. All of them have the same psulim, but each one has, at the very end of the Mishnah, consistently, each one has its own very specific halachot that are mentioned in the Mishnah. So therefore, the Tana decided that instead of combining all the psulim together and then discussing separate halachot, which would be very confusing, that three Mishnayot here we have, and then we will have the etrog, that we have back to every Mishnah is dedicated to discussing the halachot of that species, even though that you have to be redundant a little bit and discuss those common psulim. It makes more sense to dedicate a Mishnah to each one.
Before you go today, if you forgot to tie your bundle together, it's Yom Tov. Can you just hold it together?
So we do tie them, but the question is, it is very easy to get around it, because, first of all, for instance, Maran Chida writes in Sefer Moreh Be'etzba which is a very small sefer of halacha. He incorporates all the writings and the shitot of Ari HaKadosh. A beautiful sefer to read. But it's a sefer halacha. It's like a day-to-day halacha. Kitzur halachot of daily activities. So when it comes to Chag HaSukkot, he writes in one liner. He said, well, if you forgot it, you could do a full knot with the leaves of lulav, because the kesher that you make with the leaves of lulav is not really a tight kesher, so it's not isur of kosher umatir. That's how he says. Now this is a very big debate in the poskim. Chacham Obadia is very unhappy with this. He says absolutely not. You cannot, even though that Obadia is the one that finds all the kulas. She says you cannot do that. That's too risky to make two knots with the leaf of lulav. You cannot do that. But says Obadia, you could make aniva. You don't pass it like Rabbi Yehuda. Aniva you could make, so you just make it and you tie a bow and you're good to go. So says the Mishnah, Arava Gzula, now the psulim of Aravot. So Arava Gzula, Veyevesha, if it's stolen, or if it's dried, Psula, that pasul. Shel Ashera, Veshel Inani Dachat, if it's an Arava that was worshipped, then it's going to be also pasul. Same is with Irani Dachat. So we explained this already before, that because they have to be burnt and destroyed, the halacha already looks at them as burnt. So that you look at this beautiful willow branch, and the halacha looks at it as a pile of ashes. So therefore, of course, it's going to be pasul. Niktam Rosha, and this Asherah was something that was very prevalent. I mean, we spoke about this obviously before. This is based on the Gemara Avodah Zarah. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, they had all these Asherot that was considered the Avodah Zarah of a Jew because of Chet HaEgel that they did in the Midbar. And the Gemara there says, Masechet Avodah Zarah, Nit Avu, when they did Chet HaEgel, when they built the Egel HaZahav, they actually desired a lot of different Elohut, a lot of different deities. And because they had this desire for deities, the Torah considered it for them that the land that they own already, they're just haven't conquered it yet, Eretz Yisrael is their land, and they desire all these Avodah Zarah. So any Avodah Zarah that's going to be built now there is going to be considered theirs as well. And therefore, the Avodah Zarah of a Jew, there's nothing to do about that. You can't just say, oh, batel, mutarim lachem, it doesn't work like that. Avodah Zarah of a Goy works like that. So therefore, they had to burn it. Now, what other Avodah Zarah was very prevalent in the entire history of Klal Yisrael, not just when Moshe Rabbeinu came, but throughout all the Nevi'im? It's Baal, right? So this is a trick question, but this Mishnah actually has this. If you want to test someone to see if they actually know Masechet Sukkah and they've learned it, you ask them this question. You say, well, the Mishnah in Lamed Gimel Amud Bet at the bottom of the Amud says, right, that the Arava of Asherah is psula, but then you take a look at the end of the Mishnah. It says, Niktam Rosha nifratzu alea. If the tip of it was snipped, or nifratzu alea, the leaves were all detached from the stem. Vehasafsefa, this safsefa is a type of arava, which is also psula. And then the Mishnah says kemusha. If it's shriveled up, it's not dried, it's shriveled up, a little bit dehydrated. Veshenashru miktzat alea. And in arava, that some of the leaves fell, not all of them. Veshel Baal. And the arava of Baal is keshera. And if you want, you see, shel Asherah is pasul. Shel Baal is kasher, right? And if you want to add a little bit spice to the question, you could say, well, there's more Nevi'ei Baal than Nevi'ei Asherah. The Nevi'ei Sheker, the false prophets that these Avodah Zarahs had, for Baal, you had 400 Nevi'ei Sheker. It's a massive operation of an Avodah Zarah. So why Shel Baal is kasher? And you see what they say, right? But the real answer is it's completely misrepresented. The Baal does not mean Avodah Zarah Baal. There is such a thing called Sadeh Baal. Right? For those who have learned Masechet Moed Katan, you know that first perek of Moed Katan, Mashkin Bet HaShlachin, is really talking about the contrast between a Bet HaShlachin and Sadeh Baal. Bet HaShlachin is a place that Mishaleh Velai is always thirsty. You have to water it manually, right? So somewhere that doesn't get its own rain, it's not sustained and sufficiently by rain, and therefore you have to be Mashkin Bet HaShlachin. You have to manually water it. That makes an afkamina for Moed Katan. Moed Katan is a Masechet on Moed Katan, which means the Chol HaMoed. It's called small moed, miniature moed, right? Moed katan. So chol moed, you cannot do a whole lot of things. So can I water my things? It depends. If it's going to dry up without me helping it, because it absolutely needs my manual work, so then yes, mashkin bet HaShlachin in chol moed. But if it's sadeh baal means it gets sufficient rainwater, right? Sufficient rain. Now, you have sometimes Arvei Nachal, the Aravot, need a lot of water. Right? So therefore, the Torah says Arvei Nachal, this is that grows usually by the river. There's plenty of water always. But you could have sometimes that the same species grows in a land that gets sufficient rainwater. That also is good enough, right? So that's what it means, the Arava of Baal, not the Avodah Zarah Baal, but it's Sadeh Baal. Right, just the same word, but it means completely, obviously, a different thing. So it says the Mishnah that is kasher. So if it's a little shriveled up, a few leaves fell off, but the rest is there, or the arava that doesn't grow by the river, but rather it's grown in Sadeh Baal, all of those are kasher. Fine. By the way, it's funny when you ask this question, some people right away try to answer that this avodah zarah is like that avodah zarah is like that. That's like a test if you remember your Mishnayot. Okay, says the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, Arvei Nachal, when you have the pasuk in Torah that represents the quality of the four species, it says ve'arvei nachal. Right? Ulkachtev lachem b'yom harishon. You should take peri etz hadar, kapot marim, va'anaf etz avot, ve'arvei nachal. It has to be arvei nachal. Doesn't say just aravot, it says arvei nachal. So what does that exactly mean? So says the Gemara, hagedelin ala nachal. It means that they grow on the river. Davar acher, or it could mean arvei nachal, she'aleh shela mashuch kenachal, is coming to qualify what type of aravot is the aravat whose leaves are like nachal. They're not round and fat, they are skinny and flowy, right? They are meshuchim, they're long and skinny like nachal, like a river. River is narrow and long. Here also is narrow and long. There are other species of a willow tree that their leaves look exactly the same as willow tree, but they're fat and round on the end, on the edges. So that will be, according to this drasha, would be disqualified. So it says Gemara, Tanidach, we learned a different braita. Arvei nachal, this that the Torah says arvei nachal, enli el arvei nachal. I would only know from here that the willow tree that grows by the river is kasher. Shel Baal v'shel harim minayin. How do I know that if it grows in a regular Sadeh Baal, a place that has a lot of rain, but it's not by river, or even in mountains, sometimes you have it. They have the same species of aravot, but you just planted it in a field or on top of a mountain instead of planting it by the river. Is that kasher? How do I know that that's kasher? Talmud Lomar, arvei nachal mikol makom. The pasuk says arvei nachal, plural form. Arvei is aravot of, and aravot is plural form. So therefore, the pasuk, by making this plural form, is telling you that it's not just one scenario. this species of aravot, anywhere that it grows by Nachal is kasher, it grows by Sadebal is kasher, it grows by the Harim, and Gvaot is kasher. As long as you have the right species, anywhere that it grows, it would be fine. So we will, Be'ezrat Hashem, take a look. This is going to develop now to the different mitzvot of aravot that we had in the Mikdash as well, which is going to be a Gemara. We'll continue together in the next shiur.